Welcome to the Los Angeles Times Ask a Reporter. We're coming to you live from the El Segundo building, and we're happy to have you with us tonight. Thank you so much for your time. I'm Anh Do, Community Engagement Editor, and I have Christina House, our photojournalist, right in the limelight. But first, we wanted to let you know that Ask a Reporter is an ongoing series. We come to your festivals, to your neighborhoods, to your hometown, and this year we'll try to be out there a little more often, so let us know some of the places where you like to see us, and we'll try to be on hand. Christina is our guest of honor tonight, but we are most thankful for your company. We want to get right into it. This month, the month that we celebrate mothers, Christina won the Pulitzer Prize in feature photography for her series, Hollywood's Finest. And she teamed up with reporter Gail Holland and video journalist Claire Hannah Collins on an amazing years-long project. And I'm going to give shout outs to all the people involved during our show because we are so grateful for everyone's effort. But before you hear about the journey of how these amazing images came to life, let's learn a little bit about Christina herself. Christina, you grew up in Southern California.
I did.
And you went to high school in Long Beach?
I did.
Yeah, share a little bit about your background.
Shout out to Northside Long Beach and Jordan High School. I'm a local kid from Long Beach, California. In high school is when I picked up my first film camera. I took a black and white film class with Mr. Crumb,
Thank you,
watching.
Mr. Crumb.
And that was sort of my early dabble in the craft. And from there, I went on to study at Long Beach City College and then eventually at Cal State Fullerton, where I had
it's wonderful to have people who are homegrown products work among us because we really know the local landscape and we try to share a lot of that with our audience. Christina was telling me a fascinating story about when she was growing up. Her mother, who is of Filipina heritage, took the family and her siblings home back to a little island called Leyte. And that's how, her cultural background sank in, and she realized that she has a place that she actually belongs to. And I thought that was a great metaphor for the whole project of how we all seek a sense of belonging, no matter where we live.
Yeah, I attribute my interest in learning about others from that early trip that my mother brought us home to her homeland in the Philippines, in Leyte. She lives on where she grew up was a small coastal part of the island, and I was 7 years old, and I remember just expanding my mind to the different types of people that are in the world, and it got me really curious about how people lived and how that supported my interest in pursuing a career in documentation. I witnessed my mother sort of living between these two worlds. She had a life in the Philippines and she was making sacrifice to live in the United States and raising a family there, and her separation from her family and how painful that was. And it was really important to me to make memories. So every time we returned to the Philippines, I would always bring a camera. At the time, it was a CVS disposable camera.
I think we all have to start somewhere.
Yeah,
right?
So that's my childhood introduction into what I figured out was
fascination for documentation.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was called at the time.
So Christina went to Cal State Fullerton and majored in photo communications, and she started working as a photographer in 2006.
Yes.
And those early years were a struggle.
Yeah, it was a time where publications weren't hiring staff photographers. There was a lot of layoffs those few years after I graduated from college. So I just remember hearing some discouragement early on in my career as I was embarking on a freelance career. So I did work as a freelance photojournalist for the first 10 years of my career until I got hired full-time at the LA Times.
Yeah, you were doing contract work, you were waiting on tables. I mean, you really put in the long hours. And I really appreciate that knowledge about Christina's background because it brought her in touch with all manner of humanity. And so that's a sense of empathy that I think she brings to her work. Because we started working together when you were freelancing, Christina. And I was marveling at how you just asked everyone questions. You were really patient with them. You let them take as long as they needed to give you the answers. And a project like this requires the patience, and then beyond the patience, the insight and the sensitivity to sort of follow your instincts and see where they might lead you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think having the patience and giving the time of day to your covering is like the only way that you can expect someone to give you the time of day. So yeah, I'm a very patient person, and I typically listen more than I speak. And I'm a very emotional, I would characterize myself as an emotional person, so I'm really drawn to emotion, and that's the pull for me.
Yeah, emotions are sort of the elements that tie together a story, especially a story like this. So before starting this assignment, Christina, how often have you worked with homeless populations, and tell us how you handle sensitive situations and your personal style in building trust?
Yeah, I mean, this job, I do general assignments mainly, and so we're often covering, you know, populations that maybe don't have much light shed on them, vulnerable people many times, and I have visited encampments and shelters before. I did a longer piece on a homeless LGBTQI plus community, and we followed a young couple who both of them had run away from home because they weren't accepted at their home. So I did work on that for a few months, but this Hollywood's Finest was the most intense project that I had done in a unhoused individual that I had covered.
Yeah, it really brought all the people to life. You know, in the Times, we wrote about how this project unfolded. The story began when our reporter, Gail Holland, got a call from a mother, Kat Trahan, who was distraught that her daughter had lost all of her possessions, including her prenatal vitamins, during a sweep of her encampment. And she was afraid that the younger Trahan would disappear. And Christina insisted that we need to go now. We need to get ourselves there. So soon Christina, Gail Holland, and Claire Hannah Collins soon found themselves stepping through a hole in the fence above the freeway and into the world of Mckenzie Trahan.
Right.
Nearly 7 months pregnant and a member of Hollywood's unhoused community since she was 13.
Right. I still remember the first day we met Mckenzie, like as if it was yesterday. It's vivid. Yeah, Claire and I were here in the office, and it was towards the end of our work day, and Claire came over to me and told me about the phone call that Gail had received. Gail is our homelessness reporter, and we had been trying to find an individual who was in the process of trying to get off the streets, and we wanted to tell the story of someone who became pregnant while living on the streets. So it was just like an ironic moment, and we called Mckenzie right away, and she told us how to find her. I suggested we go the same day because from my experience, what can happen is they could move, you know, sometimes
there's a lot of mobility.
Yeah, the unhoused community can be moving to be closer to resources or for safety reasons, what have you. So I knew, well, we have contact now, let's change our plans and not go home and let's go visit Mckenzie. And it was a summer evening, it was dusk, and we parked in a parking lot behind a Denny's restaurant, and we looking for the hole in the chain link fence. We found it, we kind of climbed through, and what we stumbled upon was a group of her friends, and they were all just gathering what resources they could so that they can build a new home for Mckenzie. So someone found a tent, someone lent this and that, and I mean, it was kind of a beautiful thing. But she was definitely had a rough day because she had lost all her belongings. And imagine that.
Yeah, the images are really powerful.
Yeah.
And I was curious about, what did you first see that grabbed you when you came upon that scene?
Yeah, I think we have a slideshow. We can play some images while I speak about that.
Great.
Just to help the viewer. Okay, so tell me again.
What did you see that grabbed you right away when you stepped through that fence?
Well, I mean, I saw this young person who was carrying a child in her womb, and she just seemed a bit lost and uneasy, just like anybody would be if all your belongings were taken away from you. It's like such a violating experience. I mean, if you've ever had your house robbed or lost something important to you. So, I mean, I just saw her as a human being, number one, and I didn't preconceive anything about the story, and I don't like to do that. I just like to let the story unfold organically. So I just, you know, we made contact with her and just explained who we are, and you know, we understood she was going through a traumatic event, and asked if she wouldn't mind if we came by another day to visit her. So that's how it began. Yeah.
Wow, I'm really thinking and reflecting as you talk, because the images that you shot are racing through my mind. And here's someone who just came back to their station, right?
Yeah,
and
home,
had everything disappeared.
Yeah, it was like a whole community was swept through, and it was right. It's on the 101 freeway embankment in Hollywood, right off of Sunset. So it was a pretty steep embankment, you know. So not the safest place, but it was a safe place and a home for her and her community living next to her.
How did the name come about?
Hollywood's Finest?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a question most people have. Well, Mckenzie has the words Hollywood's Finest tattooed on her scalp, and you can probably see it in some of the images when she does have the side of her head shaved down. You know, and she ran away from foster care, and she found community in Hollywood, and she was part of this Hollywood street family where there was a lot of young people like her. There were a few older people who they called like their street dad or street mom, and then street brothers and sisters, but they really took care of one another, and so that was something we learned while covering this.
Yeah, I think it's easy to judge populations that we aren't familiar with.
Yeah.
And from afar, you can make any kind of snap remarks. I find it remarkable that people, you know, are challenged to live every moment of the day not knowing what is just around the corner. And reading the series and Gail's, you know, beautiful, sort of energetic, yet calm, yet unexpected words, and then having the images, and then having Claire jump in with her talents. It's a remarkable retelling of what you all are seeing in front of your eyes, and translated so well emotionally to the audience. I wonder, there were a lot of cameras around, right? There's yours, the assortment that photojournalists generally carry, and then there's Claire's equipment as a videographer. it can be overwhelming for everyday subjects.
Yeah.
How can you make it more comfortable?
Right. So typically, when I'm out working, I will have 2 camera bodies, 2 lenses, maybe a bag with a couple extra pieces of equipment. But for a story like this, because of the sensitivity and because of my wanting to blend in, and I mean, that's sort of my style, I just want to keep things simple, and I wanted to feel smaller and more compact. I typically went out with 1 camera body and 1 lens, and it was like a wide-angle zoom lens, because I knew that this story needed to be told intimately, and I needed to get close, and with the lens I need the most was the one that can keep me near. I didn't want to shoot this from afar and it be like superficial, so I just wanted to like be a fly on the wall and be smaller and compact, and just be very delicate with how I approached it, and not draw attention to myself, because this story's not about me. It's clearly about Mckenzie and her life and the people around her.
I think Mckenzie is at once vulnerable, yet she's also at once incredibly mature.
Yeah.
There's the jaded views, but there's the sort of complete innocent views about, I'm so shocked that this is happening, and life every day is a crapshoot. I really marvel at how they were able to open up the world to you and us as journalists. It's not easy to sort of penetrate that on a constant basis. So, I'm learning more about the process as you talk, but I want to touch on gender roles in a project focusing on women. Not just Mckenzie, but there's also her mother and her caseworker, and it's assigned to 3 women. Again, as reporter, Gail Holland, you as the photojournalist, and videographer, Claire Hannah Collins. Talk about how those dynamics played out.
The dynamic. I mean, I'm so grateful to have done this project with Gail and Claire. They're both extremely talented and empathetic journalists. And it was an honor for us to get to know Mckenzie and her family. And looking back on it, I mean, I wouldn't attribute that we were women to this being successful, but it was, but I mean, it kind of turned out to be a 3 women reporting on 3 women project. We didn't set out to do it that way, but that's just how it unfolded. Right when we were learning about Mckenzie and her life, her mother came into the picture. Her mother is sort of a nomad. She travels and backpacks in camps and volunteers around the country, and is an activist. She has this elaborate life that she raised Mckenzie in. And then Leslie is Mckenzie's case manager, who actually went through the same situation Mckenzie had. She had that lived experience to bring to the table. And so we found it imperative to tell that story as well. She came full circle. She had been living on the streets, homeless for years, struggled with drug addiction, had lost her own children to the system, and she found her way back on her feet and went to college and became a drug and alcohol counselor herself. And so she was able to relate to Mckenzie and connect with her in a way that maybe somebody who hadn't had that lived experience could connect with her. And Mckenzie really trusted her, and it was a beautiful relationship that they had. So that's how the story sort of unfolded in front of us. These other 2 women
I want to
involved.
read an excerpt from what Gail wrote in the story, which is Mckenzie is clear that she has made bad decisions. She ran away at age 11, started using drugs, and was in and out of juvenile hall and foster care placements. As an adult, she racked up 3 felony convictions for possession of meth, for sale, and receiving stolen property. She had shot up meth for 2 years before stopping several months before she became pregnant. and was still on probation in one case when she got the news. Yet she is multidimensional, an extraordinary portrait of someone who is at once vulnerable, yet adult.
Yeah. I mean, she's definitely a leader amongst her friends. They look to her for like advice, and she actually wanted to be a good example to them by getting off the streets and changing her life and tell them, well, hey, if I can do it, so can you. But yeah, she had lived a pretty tough life, and you know, we're all the products of our past, and we use the cards we were dealt with, and you know, some of us have an easier time than others to make it to our destination. But,
well, in the interviews, she told you all, like, I feel like my whole life has just been written for me.
Yeah.
I'm just supposed to be stuck here. I'm not supposed to get any further. In talking to Gail, our reporter, you know, she reflected on how the three of you created an atmosphere of respect for the lives that they lived. You know, and this is just part of the process and the unfolding, you know, of that life.
It's absolutely heartbreaking to hear someone say that. They feel that they were just meant to be stuck where they're at and not able to get further.
I feel that she did get further as we move along, but there was a common bond between you and Mckenzie, Christina, both being pregnant as you worked on the project. And how did that influence your personal dynamics?
So when I was assigned this to work on this story with Claire and Gail, I hadn't even announced it to the office that I was pregnant. But once we found Mckenzie, I was at the moment where I was able to tell everyone. So it was a unique situation where I was out on the streets with her, and we bonded over our pregnancies, you know, because like typically I tend to have like a little bit of a guard up because I don't want to get too close to my subjects, but and I feel like maybe she was the same way, but we just let our guards down and bonded on the fact that we were both growing little tiny humans inside of us. And it created like a way for us to foster a real genuine relationship. And you both ultimately gave birth to baby girls. Yeah.
And I thought it was amazing in reading about the saga, the photograph of her cradling her baby in the bathtub.
Yeah.
How did you get to that moment?
Yeah, well, after the baby was born, you know, we frequented her. So at that point, a week before the baby was born, she was able to get an apartment at a transitional housing facility for young women with children or expecting children. And she had mentioned that she takes a bath with her daughter. And I immediately thought that, you know, would you be open to me coming and photographing you while you take a bath with her? And, you know, because we had that trust built up to that point, it was an easy yes for her. And
Christina, do you think it's the beyond the trust? Is it, does gender play a role here?
I mean, do I think she was more comfortable being unclothed in front of me?
In front of a female journalist?
I mean, it's possible. I don't want to answer for her, but it's possible that that's how she felt. I think what was more important was the connection that we had, and that she knew I wasn't focusing on her body, you know, because anyone who had just given birth is not feeling themselves in that moment. So, and she knew my intentions were to capture the child and mother bond between them.
We can see the slideshow again. You'll see the moment of that photo, just how memorable it is.
It was one of those moments where like time stops, I would say. It just was such a serene and peaceful time to witness her bonding with her child. I mean, the baby was cooing, the water was dripping out of the faucet. It just had this beautiful sort of feel to it, and it grabbed me so much that when I had my child a few months after this moment, I also took a bath with her and sort of reenacted that, because it made such an impression on me.
Yeah, that's sort of the circle of life, never ending.
The lights changing.
Yeah, that's very poetic.
So,
people living on the streets, they have their own special dignity. You know, I really appreciate just the ability and the willingness of our sources to open up in such extraordinary measures. What emotional hurdles did you encounter?
Well, it was like my own emotions that I was processing while covering this.
Yeah, and also, you know, I think that they're in and out of different housing situations.
Yeah.
And every day is a new adventure.
Yeah. I mean, you're sort of in survival mode, you know, when you're living on the streets. You know, you don't, you can't really leave your stuff and know that it's going to be there when it comes back. And, you know, other things take a back seat, like your reproductive health, because you're just trying to survive, you know, eat, stay safe, trying to find a place to live. So, like, certain things take a back seat in the moment. But
you got such intimate portraits, you know, and that's really, really hard, because people are not used to the intrusive cameras, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, give a sense to our audience who, you know, in our everyday lives, we try to take pictures of moments when people don't want their pictures taken. It doesn't have to be a street situation like this. It can be anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, kids can't sit still. Certain people worry about the camera angles, their weight, blemishes. How do you make subjects more comfortable? What are some of the quick tricks or ways in which you can empathize with the person in front of you?
Yeah. To reach that level of comfort with one another, it takes time and patience and building a relationship and trust. And in order to do that, it's just spending time with. I spend a lot of time with Mckenzie, and there were many times I would go out and I wouldn't shoot at all. I would just be checking on her, and I'd just be following what's next. Yeah, it's kind of like this, you know, I don't want to be intrusive, but I also want to be there for the right moment. So it's like a little dance that you kind of have to delicately manage. But I really believe that like it's those intimate moments where bits of truth are revealed. So just being patient and waiting for that to sort of unpack before your eyes.
Were there any moments off limits?
I mean, there were obstacles where we had to like fight for access in certain places, but as far as Mckenzie putting certain parts of her life like to keep private, she was pretty transparent with us, and that was something that I really valued.
That's highly unusual.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I think it's really her understanding our intentions with the piece, and just having compassion for her and respect for whatever her wishes were. Because honestly, she could tell us, she doesn't have to talk to us. She could tell us that today's not a good day, and that did happen sometimes. Like maybe she just wasn't up for us to be around, and that she has asked us to come back another time.
You know, Gail Holland, the reporter on the project who covers poverty and homelessness in such an extraordinary way and through many years devoted to that beat, told me that there was so much flexibility required, you know, and she marveled at the way that you Christina worked with Mckenzie in that you shared your pregnancies with each other in the way that people do, and being mothers at the same time can be a very lovely, loving experience. You know, on one hand, certain people in your trio of journalists collaborating together were saying, let's get all the names spelled correctly, let's get the cell phones.
Yeah.
But, you know, the credit for this story idea goes to Claire. It was her vision to follow someone pregnant and on the streets searching for housing.
Yes.
Yeah.
It started with Claire. Yeah. I'm so proud of her. I mean, how far she's come in her career. She's a, I remember when she came on as an intern, and now she's gone on and she's become an independent filmmaker. She actually shot a feature-length documentary on this project that's going to be screening in Hollywood next month.
Yeah, in the chat box, Claire will give us some information on how to see the documentary.
Yeah, yeah. But this project started out with her, her curiosity about what happens to somebody who becomes pregnant while being unhoused, and she and Gail discovered that that hadn't really been reported on by the Los Angeles Times. So they embarked on that, pitched the story. I was assigned to work on it with them, and it's become like a beautiful collaboration. Yeah, I really feel like the words and the photos and the video like level up the project. It's a beautiful trifecta.
Yeah, you guys being the trifecta. We have some questions from the audience. Thank you, Christina. We also have our questions selected by Angel Jennings. She's our assistant managing editor of Culture and Talent, and the one who encouraged us to have this Ask a Reporter session.
Hi, Angel.
The question from Phil Salisbury. Wally Scalige seems to be able to see pictures before they happen. He puts himself in the right position to get the picture that he has envisioned. Do you, Christina, see your pictures before you take them?
I love that Wally is brought up in the first question. That's great.
For our
Thank you,
audience
Phil.
at home, Wally is a photojournalist here at the LA Times and Christina's husband.
Yeah, he sort of like knows when the right moment is going to happen. I know exactly what you're asking. Yeah, I mean, hearing, like for instance, the bathroom photo, the bathtub photo, when she mentioned that to me, I knew immediately that was going to be a beautiful scene. But just kind of knowing the timeline, and a story like this, it's kind of unpredictable. Like, it did involve a lot of flexibility, and this wasn't the only project that we were all working on at the same time. I think that's something that people don't understand. It's not like we were solely working on this project for 4 years only. I mean, I was balancing. I was also
breaking news,
daily assignments, and I was also, while following Mckenzie, I was shooting a Women in Sports portrait series. So I was traveling the country for that, and just managing all those things. But okay, back to Phil's question. You can kind of like map out in your mind what would be like the perfect set of photos to tell this story, but you know, I don't like to dive too deep into that because I want to allow for some spontaneity. But it is easy to envision, like, she said she has this coming up, and envision in your mind what that perfect photo looks like. But
yeah, as journalists, we have a basic vision of what we may find on the scene, but we're also very flexible.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to follow the magic unfolding.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes the magic is so alluring. Sometimes it's devastating, right?
Yeah, because it's not always a happy ending. You know, that's real life, you know.
We have another question from Martha Groves. Based
Hi,
on what
Martha.
you have witnessed, do you think that we as a society should be able to force unhoused people with what appear to be mental health issues into therapy? Also, what is the latest on Mckenzie today
Okay.
and her baby?
Okay. Thank you for your question. I'll start with where Mckenzie and the baby are at today. So the baby is currently in foster care. She's with a foster family, and Mckenzie has lost her parental rights. So we don't have any, that information beyond that mark is not public. And it's very like closed door for anyone to find out her whereabouts. And Mckenzie, the last time I saw her was about 2 months ago. And she was housed in the Glendale area. She had an apartment, and her mother, who was also unhoused, was able to get an apartment in the same building. So they were able to sort of look out for one another and live nearby, which was nice. But I have heard recently that Mckenzie is no longer living there, and I'm still currently trying to catch up on her whereabouts and how she's doing now.
Yeah. Part of the extraordinary experience of covering unhoused population is trying to keep track of where people are at a given moment in time. And sometimes the cell phones work, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
The numbers change quite a bit.
That is true.
And one thing that Claire said that really stuck with me is that, you know, part of the job is trying to understand someone's choices, even if you don't approve of them. Everybody judges homelessness and unhoused people, and these judgments can really be so pervasive, you know, along the lines of she really made bad choices. But, you know, one thing I am grateful for is how our sources, especially people on the streets in quite vulnerable environments, are gracious and brave enough to open up to us.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, she was tired of being invisible. Her and her mother both voiced that, and they were very much aware of the stigma that comes from being a homeless person. I remember once just sitting on the street with her and a car going by. It was like at a freeway off-ramp, so oftentimes it'd be cars just like stacked up waiting for the red light, and she saw somebody just staring at her, and Mckenzie was like, what are you staring at, you know? And nobody wants to be stared at, so I can understand how you feel like people don't think that your value as a human being is the same as their value as being a human being. Like, if you can understand what I'm saying.
It's hard to judge. And, you know, we try to step back. And
totally. And we went into this, like, trying our best to have no judgment and trying to kind of unravel what's going on in her life. Like, it's like, at times, at moments, it's chaotic. There's a lot of drama that comes with living on the streets. And even though she was housed, she still is kind of reeled back into that drama of her friends who are still just out in the streets trying to survive. But you know, when people go through trauma, they have like a disconnect, and so you disconnect from your own self, and in order to like exist in that trauma if you haven't processed it. So it's unfair for us to pass judgment on her life's choices and decisions. You know.
Yeah. For much of the time, we're chroniclers of what's unfolding before our eyes, and you know, we also try our best. Getting back to Martha's first part of the question, based on what you have witnessed, Christina, do you think that we as a society should be able to force unhoused people with what appear to be mental health issues into therapy?
I mean, that's a heavy question, and I won't even for a minute pretend that I'm like a licensed professional who can answer that question. But yeah, it's tricky. Like it's a really good question. I really wish I had a better answer for it, like any answer to give you. But yeah, I mean, I'm not me following Mckenzie in her life. Like I don't declare to be a like a know-it-all on everything related to homelessness, but
yeah, this is a question that gives us quite a lot of pause, and we really need to think about it.
Yeah,
maybe we can answer more by email.
Yeah, that's a heavy one.
We thank you for your good questions so far. Here's one from SB Money, who says, such an impactful and thoughtfully told story. I'm curious to know what some of the biggest hurdles you face to tell this story, such as hospital access, staying in contact with Mckenzie, etc. Because, you know, a lot of unhoused folks, individuals or families, the phones change quite a bit.
Yeah, it's true.
It's lost, it's traded, it's taken back.
Yeah, or
how
even
did you keep the connection?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time where when her daughter was taken away from her, she was no longer eligible to stay in her transitional studio apartment, and so she had to move out because only for mothers and children. So she had to return to the streets, and for some time we had some challenges trying to track her down. I know that Gail and Claire spent a lot of time visiting different encampments and getting some intel on where they might be able to find her.
So you guys were playing detective?
A little bit of detective work, yeah. The obstacle with getting access to the hospital just took you know, a lot of phone calls and explanations, and just it can be a lot sometimes, and also the hospital folks have to be on site and following you around to, you know, monitor what we're doing in the hospital and make sure that we're not photographing any other patients. You know, HIPAA laws, we had to be respectful and very like aware of what we were doing there. But we only focused on her and the baby's father and the child.
Yeah, we have a comment from Chanel Parson, who said, Christina is such an amazing photographer and an even better person. I'm not at all surprised she was able to genuinely connect with Mckenzie and get these intimate photos. You know, was there any moment when they sort of slammed the doors and said enough for now?
Mckenzie or anyone involved? You know, surprisingly, Mckenzie was almost always welcoming to us. Like I said, there were a few times when she said, like, not today, and we respected that, you know, but it was like a nice relationship that we had with her, that she was almost always welcoming to us. Yeah, she didn't close off anything. She was like an open book, and she was able to talk about her past trauma, which is very difficult to listen to. For those who haven't read the story, like, some of that was when she was a child, she was molested by a friend's stepfather, and then she was placed in like a mental institution after that. And then when she was a teenager living on the street, she was actually kidnapped and chained to a toilet, and
I remember those
just like very
moments in the story.
Things that she's survived, and so it's just miraculous that she's still standing today and was able to still put one foot in front of the other, and still like be able to find a way to laugh or smile or write music and do artwork. You know,
it's incredible how sources open up to us.
It is,
and it's a very, you know, transformative process, I think. You know, you come away from the story changed, and then you also see the people who you're documenting change before your eyes as well. What, you know, how can people in our audience, they may not be journalists, you know, our readers, they just want to convince the person in front of them to relax. in an uncomfortable situation to relax, to be able to take photos and find that trust? What are your tips?
Yeah. In general, I just, even beyond this project, I just typically, to get people comfortable, is I just talk to them and I welcome any questions they have for me too. You know, like I'm coming into your space and asking you all these intimate questions. You have the right to ask me what you want. You can take a picture of me because I'm taking a picture of you. And I think just like the back and forth kind of gets people to relax a bit. And I'm pretty like easygoing. That's just my style.
Yeah.
I'm just like the soft-spoken sort of non-intrusive person.
I think the give and take is so powerful because we are extracting so much that is private about someone's life and not just documenting that through words, but the most intimate of images, right? And you have to be able to offer some type of exchange in order to have that connection ongoing. You know, I've worked with Christina for many, many years, long before you found a permanent staff job. And I was reflecting before this evening about how you try so hard. It could be a story that has the potential for page 1, or it could be a story that will land inside the metro section. It did not matter the placement. You brought to it an intensity and a respect that I will just try my best to get the subjects to be at ease and to be honest with them about the process. How can, you know, young journalists watching our live stream today learn from that?
I mean, a lot of times I don't know where the story is going to print. It may be a cover story, maybe just something they run online, but I treat everything with the same energy that I give. You know, the way I photograph a celebrity is the same way that I approach someone who is just a common person who's running a business, or, you know, someone I meet just on all these different things that we cover. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I just photograph everything with like the same respect and same interest. You know, I think it's like having a general interest, genuine interest in people.
Genuine,
and, and just really, like, I really am a curious, nosy is probably like not the right word, but
we can say nosy.
Really, journalists are nosy. Like, we're really curious, nosy. We want to know why, how. You know, I've just always been interested in the way people live and why do they do that for a job and why did they take that decision instead of this decision and how things operate. You know, I've just been genuinely curious about how life is.
I understand what you're saying, because before I meet someone new, I always try to visualize them and the environment that I will find them in.
Okay.
And then how I will enter into that environment to try to build a rapport or at least have a glimpse in that moment of
world,
what it is that they're passionate about, or what they fear, what they love, how they thrive, right?
It's
There's another question from our audience, S. Kopelman. How long did you follow Mckenzie?
So
are you still in touch with her? How did you balance getting to know her and your emotional involvement while keeping your distance as a professional photographer?
There's like a fine line you don't want to cross, that we're taught not to cross, you know. Mckenzie understood that, you know, I couldn't give her a ride somewhere. I couldn't be a part of the story, you know, that I was there just to document what she was experiencing. And she understood that very well. But I think that comes from just being transparent up front and answering all her questions and just having this fluid conversation where like nothing was off limits to touch. We followed her starting in 2018. It feels like ages ago. And the first 2 years were the most intense. And then after that, it became more just like waiting for things that are going on in her process, like where is she at with her child. I know during COVID, she had her visitations only by phone. So the visitations
that's
in person.
incredibly tough.
Yeah, and there's a photo where she's reading a book over FaceTime to her daughter.
Right. I remember talking to you, Christina, as we were preparing for tonight, and you said something that really stayed with me, which is, how do you expect someone to give you the time of day if you don't give them the time of day? Meaning putting in all the behind the scenes hours to get to the meat of the story, but also the sense of poetry and justice, and then the ultimate ending, and then what happens beyond that.
Everyone has a story, and sometimes people have lots of stories. So just listening into their life story is something that they value. Someone's listening. And like I said, giving her the time of day to explain and walk us through parts of her life that maybe she felt nobody gave a damn about before. I think that had some value for her, that we were lending a listening ear. And I mean, I gave her full, I was open with her, and so Gail and Claire, we were all open to just hearing her out, and also the stories of her mother and her past. And exactly how could I expect her to give me any time if I'm not giving the time for her to have her moment to share. Yeah.
Projects or any daily stories is a process of give and take.
It is.
It's participatory. It's not standing back and being a fly on the wall. I mean, you don't inject yourself into the story, but you need to be observant enough to know when there are twists and turns and go with the flow.
And it's a blessing for someone to open up their life to you, to want to share.
Absolutely, I agree. I like how you approach the work, because, we were talking, Christina, and you said, I don't like to preconceive what the shoot will be, right? I take it organically and see what unfolds.
Yeah.
That's advice that we can also apply to life, as the day evolves.
Yeah. Well, right, because we came into this, not that it's a simple topic, but just solely just trying to see what we can reveal with what life was like for someone living on the streets and becoming pregnant. And then after hearing Mckenzie's life story, and then her mother coming into the picture and learning about her story and her past, then all these other topics of intergenerational trauma, intergenerational homelessness started to unfold before us. So it was just sort of leaving space for them to unpack their lives, because it's a lot. It's a lot of heavy things to listen to. It's hard.
And it happens at all the unexpected moments, like most of life.
Yeah, which is why you have to be present.
Absolutely. We have a last question from Janet Cho.
Hi, Janet.
For how long did you follow Mckenzie? Are you still in touch with her?
Yeah.
How did you balance getting to know her and your emotional involvement and keeping your distance as a professional?
Yeah. That seems to be those are the themes people are so interested about.
Yeah.
So from start to finish, the project was about a 4-year-long project, because it started in 2018 and it was published in 2022. But I mean, there's a lot of behind the scenes things that go on in a newsroom to get a story of this caliber published. And we were grateful that it was a special section, but it just took time to get it to that point. But I wouldn't say that for 4 years we were following her, but it was a good 2.5, 3 years at least, but we always kept in touch. Like if something did change in her life, we were there. We were willing to go out and film more, shoot more.
So the project is a thread weaving through your professional life, and then meanwhile, all 3 journalists had other assignments coming up.
Yeah, for sure. We were juggling different stories at the same time.
Absolutely.
There was another part of her question, or did I?
I think that's it.
And how did
you started the project with photo editor Jeremiah Boger.
Yes.
And then Mary Cooney came on board, and we want to thank both individuals for all of your magic that you put into this. Yeah. And I know that Gail started, working with Steve Clow from the beginning, and we also had a lot of guidance from Mitchell Landsberg, who has since retired after a very successful career at the LA Times. Ongoing guidance from Scott Kraft. Yes. And, Claire Collins was working with our editor, Eric Himmelbach Weinstein. Yeah. It takes a village to put together this type of project. Yeah. And we are very, very grateful to our fellow colleagues, but also our readers, right?
Yeah.
There is a final question from Dixon Louie. Christina, great photos. How has this experience in telling Mckenzie's narrative made you a better storyteller through photos?
Great question. She's made a huge impact on my life, honestly. As far as her story changing the way I move forward or help me become a better storyteller. Along the way, there are many moments where I paused and reflected on my own life, and she kind of got me on that path of like, how does this affect me? And it's like, this was the first project where it was like absolutely heartbreaking and emotional for me throughout. Because becoming a parent at the same time, I couldn't imagine how it was just devastating news to hear that she was no longer with her child was no longer with her.
Yeah, you cry when you come to that part.
Yeah.
Here is someone like you who has the privilege of going home to her child. Right.
I was very aware that at the end of my days with her, I was able to jump in my car and drive home and sleep in a bed. And I had no problem getting a doctor's appointment, all those things. So it just emphasized the real reason why it's so imperative that we tell stories of people who don't have the same privilege. And it's important to empathize with them. I think like having compassion for people experiencing a different narrative than your own is really key to understanding and learning about the world around us, because I think we're all craving like meaning and purpose in life, and this story really got me to reflect on my own life, and it got me to not that I wasn't compassionate for others before, but having worked so closely with someone who was like on the same path as I was, but we went through this journey of becoming moms to little girls together. It's gotten me to really tap into that highly emotional part of my reporting, and
what would you have done different?
What do you mean?
Anything along the photographic process?
I was just present for everything that happened to her, and I'm very grateful to her openness, and I just honor the privilege of getting to know her, and I was rooting for her then, and I am still rooting for her now, and I just truly hope that she will be able to find herself again and just know that she's worthy of having a fulfilled and meaningful life. You know, and that's all I hope for her.
Yeah, I think you described it really well, Christina. We do leave the words still rooting for Mckenzie. You know, still curious, wanting to know what is her next chapter.
Yeah.
And maybe someday we'll have a chance to tell that. You know, the LA Times is doing a lot of experimenting with our storytelling.
Yeah.
And we're hiring and growing, and our newest initiative is the Early Childhood Coverage Project, which we launched last week here in Los Angeles, and we'll be bringing that to you, more and more coverage of the crucial years from ages 1 to 5 as we roll through the summer and into the fall. Please stay with our coverage, and please give us your feedback. You know, we're open, we're not defensive, we are very compassionate to our audience here, and we thank you so much for your time tonight. I learn every day from my job, and I am grateful to have this sort of window into all the lives unfolding across the West Coast. Thank you for your precious time tonight. Thank you to Christina, and thank you to all of our editors who support this work.
Thanks for tuning in and reading the LA Times.